What's up, everybody? Brady Figueroa coming at you with a review for the new Eric Bass solo album, I Had a Name, that was released this past Friday, February 28th. Eric Bass is, of course, the bassist for hard rock giants Shinedown, and this is actually the first solo project that's come out of the Shinedown band as a whole. So that alone made this album pretty intriguing for me. Shinedown is a band that I grew up with, and I still enjoy a few of their albums, especially Sound of Madness and Amaryllis. But I will admit, I did have a little bit of trepidation going to this album for a few different reasons, but all the reasons sort of centering around the same idea. For one, the fact that this is a concept album, and the band and Eric Bass himself has been kind of unraveling some of the story behind it, and it has characters and has like this very clear storyline to it, I guess. And then also the fact that I haven't really been too big on Shinedown's last few albums. I think Attention was solid, but Planet Zero a few years ago was, God, that was a disaster of a record. In my opinion, maybe their worst record to date. And for me, a lot of that had to do with the overall emphasis on storytelling, which to me just didn't really add anything to that record. And that record in particular, they had all those interludes spaced throughout it, and just overall, I feel like there was such a strong emphasis on concept and storytelling. And as a result, the music kind of suffered. It's like they prioritized the storytelling over the actual songwriting. Attention was kind of the same way, although I definitely think it was a better execution of it. So overall, my main worry going into this album would be that Eric Bass would kind of push these storytelling ideas and these character-based and these storyline-based ideas, but just not have music that's interesting enough or prioritized enough to make this as interesting of a record as it could be. And I also wasn't crazy about the two singles that were released, although I'm going to elaborate on them as a whole in the track listing. But overall, it was sort of because of those fears that I was already having about it, and the singles kind of made those fears come to life a little bit. But I will admit, when I first played this album, the first two tracks I actually found myself enjoying quite a bit. The opening track on here, A World Unseen, is actually a really lovely acoustic ballad that later in the song you get some almost like sort of synthesized and robotic sounding vocals from Eric, and they actually sound really good. They sound really full and pack some decent emotion to them. And the overall melodies in this song are just really warm and tear-jerking, and this is just a really nice way to start the album. And it's pretty unorthodox too. You don't really see bands, especially in the hard rock and sort of metal genres, starting their albums off with an acoustic ballad. So I think that was a classy move on Eric's behalf, so props to him on that. And then track 2, The New Gods of War, is another one that I find myself actually enjoying quite a bit. It's full of energy, it's got some double bass grooves in there, and even that main riff, that's how it kind of has that stop-start thing going. The intro of the song, too, actually builds up a decent amount of momentum before it explodes into that main riff. This is just one of the more dynamic cuts on here, and it's pretty enjoyable. Even the chorus, which does use a lot of elements that I would normally find to be cheesy, I guess, like the kind of chanty vocals and the "we are" lyrics, which is something I always kind of cringe at. We are this, we are the ones, stuff like that. But it just flows so well, and the way these walls of vocals are produced, it really does add this extra layer of drama and momentum. Like, I listen to that part and I feel like a crowd of people are just like pushing me through the last leg of a foot race. The second verse brings in some like almost sort of dissonant, sort of like, I don't know how to describe the feelings I get from it. I guess suspenseful would be a good adjective to use, and that ends up actually again flowing pretty well into the next chorus, and then the end of the song has some sort of mysterious piano parts that I think are cool. So already, I mean, with these two songs, the album is definitely maintaining this sense of unpredictability, in a sense that I don't really know what's going to come next, whether it's the next song or the next part in the song. And that's always something I enjoy as a listener, and especially in a concept album like this, I think that adds to the overall like storytelling aspect of it. But unfortunately, the album doesn't really keep that momentum up, because for my taste, the next array of tracks really does fall into that trap of storytelling first, music second. I remember when I first heard the second single, Azalia, which actually comes next in the track listing, I was trying not to crack up, because that main, like, I don't know if it's a flute or something, that main melody that starts off the song, it reminds me of that, like, those, like, memed, like, like recorders. I don't know. It's going to be hard to, if you don't get this reference, it's going to be hard to describe it. It's like a meme audio, someone playing the recorder like really badly on purpose. It instantly reminded me of that and had me cracking up. But even aside from that, the song ended up just being really, really corny. Like in the chorus when he's going, oh, hey, ya, like, what year is it? I realize Eric's trying to be like wonky and off the walls, and maybe avant-garde would be a good way of describing it. And I usually like that stuff. I mean, just listen to System of a Down, for instance. But rather than it sounding different or unique in the ways I would describe System of a Down, this song just makes me cringe. It really does. We Can't Go Home is one that actually starts off with a decent amount of momentum with that chunky opening riff, but after that, like, the vocals on this song are kind of what kills it for me. They sound like oddly droopy, I guess, and kind of just bring down the energy of the song. And then halfway through, you get the children chant vocals, which is always something that makes me cringe. The next 3 tracks, including the lead single Mind Control, are all songs that I just really find it tough to get through, just because of how boring they are. These songs have just no hooks, no memorable parts. They fall perfectly into the trap that I mentioned earlier. And these are kind of the songs where the production starts to become an issue for me, because you listen to these instrumental parts and they just sound really, really thin. Like when those high notes from Eric and on the vocal front kick in on Goodnight, Goodnight, like just listen to how thin the instruments sound behind it. They sound like when your neighbor's blasting music and you're putting your ear up to the wall to guess what song it is. And then New Graves has these melodies that try to sound like whimsical, but again, they kind of just end up being corny, and there isn't enough there's enough of a musical backbone to it to really back that up. It's like an attempt at like a Dark Circus type feel, but again, just music-wise, I feel like this song is just pretty straightforward hard rock and alternative rock, but just with these over-the-top avant-garde type vocals thrown on top of it, which I'll say it for the 3rd time now is something that immediately I was worried about going to this album. Because really the only instrumental aspect of this song that does back up those Dark Circus type vibes would be like the synthesizers, which doesn't exactly do the actual instruments justice. All Good Children would be a pretty decent song if it ended after the second chorus and there weren't those like ridiculous vocal parts at the end that are there for literally no reason. And same with Modenheart. Like if you get past like the first minute and 10 seconds, which is just has one of the most boring riffs on the album that really does not get stuck in your head at all, and you skip right to those like pulsating bassy verses, that song would be much more replayable, because it just at the end of the day is too long and has too many unnecessary parts. But no, the rest of the song I actually enjoy quite a bit. Like when it breaks down into that piano part, definitely did not see that coming, and it kicks back into a solo. At the end of the day, musically, the song is just a really, really mixed bag. Or this album is a really mixed bag, is what I meant to say, because the next track, Dead Inside, actually has a good amount of energy to it. It's got those stomping snare drums driving it forward, but then the next song, Churches of the Dead, is just so boring. Even with its kind of attempting to be intense musical sections spliced in, doesn't really help. And then, of course, there's the outro track, Wanna Go to Hell, which goes for sort of more of those Dark Circus type vibes a little bit, or like maybe Uncanny Valley type vibes a little bit. But this song really serves more as just an outro track, so I probably wouldn't have added it to my playlist anyways. Now, as far as notes on the album as a whole, a drawback to having these specific ideas of concept albums is that I don't really find anything lyrically that I can attach to. It's the same kind of issue I was having on the last few Shinedown albums. For one, you really can't tell what the album and the songs are actually about just from the lyrics alone. I feel like to enjoy the lyrics of this album, you need to have all of like that background information, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like if you're a big follower of Eric Bass, as I'm sure some people who watch this review will be, then you might be more familiar with it. But as a casual listener, and just as anybody that might be giving this album a shot, not being a strong follower of his, then it kind of impacts the listening a little bit. Because when songs aren't relatable or they don't give you a strong emotion to feel, then it's really hard to find anything to latch onto. And it's a shame sometimes, because there are actually like a few lines on this album that stuck out to me and I thought were pretty cool lines. Modenheart, there's the line where he says, "You can't tell me guns don't make the man when apathy is streaming on demand." I feel like there could have been somewhat of like a socio-political theme wrapped around that line, but instead it just kind of comes out of nowhere and you're left with it kind of lost in the song and nothing to build off of it. And there's other parts on the album where like there's some cool musical ideas, but then there's the cheesiest fucking lyrics over it that make the part unlistenable. The absolute worst of which is on Dead Inside, when Eric says, or I guess asks, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a desperate man clinging on, or something along those lines. And then you get the background music going, 1, 2, 3, I don't know. God. And on the vocal front, I will say Eric definitely overuses the hays and the ohs and the yeahs. Like, All Good Children is definitely one of the more enjoyable tracks in here for him, but what are those hays adding to that song? They feel so unnecessary. If they're used sparingly, I think they're fine, as long as they're not too overblown and cheesy, but they're just all over this album. Not just the hays, but just ideas like that. But also on the vocal front, I will say that Eric Bass does sound pretty good. He actually sounds a lot like Brent Smith. But overall, is this album for me? No, it's definitely not for me. But if you're a Shinedown fan, and especially a Shinedown fan who has enjoyed their last few albums, I would definitely recommend this album to you. For my money, though, it should have been music first, storytelling second, and that's not what I got. This album gets an 11 out of 30 for me. As always, thank you guys very much for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe button for more rock and related content. I got my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video, and definitely comment your thoughts on this album if you've already heard it. Until next time, thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.